Okay. Okay, I can record.
Okay.
So it's good. Okay, let me. So hello everyone. Welcome today on today's webinar organized by Early Career Forecaster Group, which works along with the International Institute of Forecasters. Today I have lovely three guests for you, on which we're going to discuss about the project management, and we're going to dive deeper into what kind of tools we can use while we are facing basically any project, whether it is the project scientific one, which might be our PhD thesis, or even the project that just has been financed. And we have to plan ahead what we're going to do and what we're going to deliver, but also the project in the business. So when we are facing some deliverables to our bosses or to the clients that for which we are working, how basically we can prepare ourselves. And as I have mentioned today, we have three lovely guests for us today. So please welcome warmly Stefan Kolasa, Baron Berenjan, and Violetta Stobiniecka. And Stefan is a data science expert in SAP Switzerland. He was also the vice president on corporate research and the former director of ISF. And right now, if I'm not wrong, you are also working, Stefan, in Foresight, our business-oriented journal. Isn't that right?
Yeah. I got saddled with the title of deputy editor.
Sounds, let's say, important.
It sounds important, yes. I think I've been doing a lot of work for it, and it's like a little star that I get.
Okay, what happened?
En la tablet, ¿tienes instalado el Zoho Show Viewer este?
I think we're switching to Spanish now.
Hopefully which? I'm sorry, Bryce. Sorry, Oscar. I need to mute you. Hopefully that's going to be fine. And the second guest, it's Baron Berenjan. And Baron is Director of Data Science in the International Consultancy Company. And he's the expert in the customer experience analysis. So the churn analysis, the loyalty programs. It's an expert in that field. And he has been working in the plethora of industries such as retail, aviation, FMCG, or the subscription-based platforms, and many more. So Baron, happy to have you today. And please let us know if you can hear us.
Yes, thank you so much, Mikhail. Yes, happy to be here, everyone. Very much looking forward to this webinar.
Thank you. And also today with us, it's Violetta Stobiniecka. Violetta is a senior data scientist at Amazon Web Services and also the co-founder of Foodwiser.ai. It's an AI-based personal food assistant application, and as well has a former experience in banking and fraud detection. So Violetta, welcome warmly, and also it's good to have you today.
Great, thank you so much for invitation and for this introduction of myself. Yeah, thank you.
It's a pleasure to introduce such a wonderful guest today. So let me start with you, Viola. By the way, I'm going to ask the questions to our guests, and every question is for all of the guests. So our audience can get the opinion of all our guests or on the questions. And however, after the my questions to the guests, I will open also floor to you, to your audience. So if you have any questions to our guests, or you would like to ask more, feel free to ask after the, I call it the official part of the webinar, but we are not really that official today here. So as a young forecasters, we are facing the project for the maybe first time, for the second time, but it's definitely getting more and more important and serious in that sense. So once I face the serious project, either it's the research or the business project, how do I start that project? So what kind of checklist it's I supposed to create before I start and departure for my adventure? Viola, if I can ask you to,
Yes, of course.
start.
I would say that it's, I think that it's pretty obvious one, but yeah, we definitely need to understand the goal. Yeah, of course, I will be talking more from the, I would say not a high level perspective, but broader perspective, because I'm a bit outside of your world. I'm not a forecasting specialist, expert. Yeah, forecasting is one of my area of knowledge, but I'm not specialized in that. So I would like, to talk more about, from a broader perspective. And I've always been, as a data scientist, I started my career on the vendor side, and I'm still on the vendor side, so to say. So I'm, pretty much used to, work with external customers. So regarding this, taking into account this, my experience and this, the kind of, environment and type of work, which I do on a daily basis, is more or less, it's always about understanding, of course, the goal of the project, whether this is more about, discovery, or whether we are actually know what we want to deliver, we are precise definition of our problem. And of course, yeah, we can be a part of the project before the requirements are gathered, are defined. Yeah, it all depends on the problem, whether actually my customer really understand the problem they have, or they are open, for the discussion, and we are supposed to, to discover the kind of problems they have, and then propose some solutions. So I would say the goal, requirements, of course, deliverables. Yeah, whether this needs to be a whole system, and what we mean by entire system. This is supposed to be only one model which fits into existing system, are supposed to contribute to that, because it will impact the timeline for us, for our resources. Based on that, we need to define the resources we need, the team, build the team, the type of expertise we need our team, and of course it's all tied to a budget. Yeah, so based on that, we need to plan accordingly. Sometimes the timeline is we need to change the scope, but sometimes it's as I mentioned, pretty clearly defined. Sometimes we need to change it, we need to adjust it. It can turn out after we start working on something that we are not able to deliver something exactly. We need to do some work around, or propose changing a scope, because we've become aware of some of the constraints, for some of the lacking data sources or whatever, something which a kind of blockers, which impediments which we have, and which will needs to definitely impact the type of delivery which we can provide. So this is more or less all from my side when it comes to checklist.
So basically we need to have a map. So where we are going with the goal, what is our problem solution, what we have to deliver as a manager, and with what resources and the budget, which from my perspective, it's never enough, whatever the budget is discussed.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's why we need to, make tough decisions, and we just need to, because we always, want to, of course, maintain the highest standards of what we can deliver, but sometimes we need to make a trade-off. So we just need to, think about what are the low-hanging fruits. yeah, in our setup, what we can cover very quickly, get a quick win, whether we have time for research or we just need to go with the baseline and see how it works and then decide whether we want to, you know, spend some more time on increasing the performance of our solution and so on and so on. But it all depends on the specific project, I would say, this kind of details. Yep.
Definitely. Stefan, as you have the experience from journals, if there's anything else or there's a different preparation in terms of the academic paper that I wanted to write as a
well, it depends. I wouldn't really say that my advice. Well, first of all, Violetta already said a lot of things that I was going to say, so I may have a little less to say. So she did a great job there. I wouldn't say that so many things are so different between academia and business and industry. One thing is, well, we're forecasters. Most of the people here are forecasters, so most of us do forecasting with data. And the question always is, where's the data? Do we already have the data that we need to forecast, or are we looking for data, or are we expecting data from the customer? So when I'm in a business environment, my customer is complaining about our forecasts, and I usually say, well, you have to give me data, and then I can start playing around and see whether our systems have a systematic problem or something. But the first thing I need is data from the customer, and I usually get told, yes, of course, you'll get the data in 3 days, and then I know that it's going to take at least 2 weeks, and then I can ask them again, and then they'll tell me, well, we had a little problem, but you'll definitely get it next week. And so honestly, whenever I hear that I will get data, it's probably going to take at least 4 weeks longer. And if people say they have a particular piece of information in their data, I expect that piece not to be there, because the people that promise it to you usually don't know what is in their data sets. And if people tell me their data is of great quality, that sets alarm bells ringing, because then usually it isn't. And so honestly, I think for forecasters, a key thing to understand at the very beginning, at the very outset of the project, is if we don't already have the data in hand, when do we get it? Who do we get it from? And what's our fallback solution or fallback possibility if we never get data, because that happens often enough. And well, if you have a deadline for submitting the paper or a deadline for submitting the proposal for a software development or something, and you don't get the data, you can't just stand there and say, I didn't do anything because I didn't get the data. So at some point in time, you need to either rely on publicly available data, or you have to simulate something. And that is something you need to figure out at the very beginning of the project if you don't have the data. And I think that's a very important thing, because you're usually very surprised at the first time you see actual data that has not yet been curated, because much of academic forecasting relies on highly curated data sets like the M competition data that everybody understands by now. But once you go out in the real world, you get confronted by actual data, and it's incredible how bad real data can be. And so just figuring out if the data is bad, what can we do then? And it's better to figure that out early. And along with what Violetta said, I would say time boxing is essential, especially if you have a deadline. If you have to provide some solution at some point in time, then you need to have milestones. And if you don't hit them, then you have to escalate the problems to somebody else. Like, I didn't get the data by this point in time. I will continue with simulated or publicly available data, but here's a red flag that I have to raise. This will be a problem for the entire project. And you have to communicate that early on. So don't just communicate the problem, I didn't get the data, or what I'm trying to do doesn't work. Just communicate also your proposed solution. This isn't working, I'm going to try that. I didn't get the data, I'm going to use that data set. I'm going to simulate something like that. And having a time box ensures that you can raise an alert soon enough and not at the end of the project when everything's broken down. I think that holds both for an academic exercise like a master's thesis or a PhD thesis or anything else where you probably got third-party funding for, where people want to see a result within 2 years or something, as in a business environment. So it's the same thing there.
It's a very good answer in the sense that what kind of data we have and basically what we can do and how we want to proceed. So what the path we wanted to set. Baron, we had 2 exhaustive exhaustive. It's not the right word. Apologies. Very extensive answer. Is there anything else you would like to add from your experience from running the data science project?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Stefan and Violetta, they covered quite, as you say, extensively what essentially would be the checklist that you kick off with. I think for me, I believe in essentially front loading a lot of activities up front and drafting a backlog of all the relevant tasks, dependencies, estimated efforts, and then essentially, being able to identify what the unknowns are. What are the things that you have control over, and what are the things that you don't have control over? And I like what Stefan outlined, which is it's easy to come up with a problem, but you should always have a fallback solution as well to kind of think about how you'd address it, because it's quite easy to pinpoint that this is an issue. We should always, in my opinion, have something that you can fall back on. Then once you have a good view of what the unknowns and unknowns are, what you have control over and what you don't, then essentially you can draft a plan that takes into account all different scenarios and monitor ongoing change and adapt accordingly. That's just, I mean, it was covered very well by Stefan and Violetta, but this is essentially how a few additional points that I think helps a lot.
Definitely, like trying to think ahead what can go wrong on where there's our, let's say, weak points in our project, so we can, as you mentioned, adapt or detour the project so we can deliver what we have promised. It's indeed also an important part on our checklist that when we wanted to start the project. I've asked you about what we should prepare, but there's also the second part, how I can prepare myself. So before we start the project, are there any techniques that can make me, as running a project, or also my co-workers and colleagues that I'm running the project with, is there any techniques that you can share it with us which can boost my productivity or sharpen my focus, making sure that I can deliver what I have promised? And Stefan, if I can start with you.
Sure. Actually, I'm personally a big fan of the getting things done. I don't know whether it's flipped for you guys, but that's David Allen, the book. It's a productivity framework that I personally like a lot. It's essentially, read the book if you want to. There's also tons of resources on the website. And so this veers very much into personal productivity, and there's essentially a huge amount of resources out there. Yeah, the key things is knowing what's supposed to be to happen when, and how do you make sure that things happen. One tool that I like to use is this 43 folders tool, essentially, where you have in your Outlook or whatever email system you have a folder for every upcoming day and future months. And whenever I know that something has to happen on a certain day, I put an email, I write myself an email and put it into that folder that's labeled with the month. And every morning I open that folder and see what's happening today. And if I send out an email that requests information, or if I'm asking for data and know that I should be getting data by a specific point in time, then I send myself a reminder or put myself into BCC. And then when I get that email, I put it in the folder for that particular day. Then I open the folder on that day and I know, well, I should have gotten my data by yesterday evening. I haven't gotten it, so time to send out a reminder. Stuff like that. It's a small things that just make sure nothing falls between the cracks and kind of gets lost. Yeah, that's a personal productivity, and you could do an entire webinar on techniques for all that. But then the other thing that you mentioned is dealing with collaborators and co-workers, and that's of course getting more and more harder and harder, as I would say, with people all over the globe in different time zones, and you don't see them, and you collaborate with people on different continents that you may have never met in 3D. And yeah, it's kind of need to understand them, understand how they tick, understand what's important with them. If you collaborate with somebody over a year on a project, and to figure out who's the person who is dependable and who's the person who is less so, who is the person who will get their things done with time to spare, and who's the person who will do crunch time, the 24 hours before the deadline. And it's really a question of figuring out what kind of person you are yourself. I personally hate doing things at the last minute, and I don't like working with people whose modus operandi is that way. And you really need to figure out who ticks in what way and how you deal with that. And there's a lot of soul searching and understanding yourself in there too, to figure out what's important to you and what you can deal with and what you can't deal with. And then at some point in time, it's really hard to motivate people who tick differently than you are. And you need to understand that and accept that and figure out, can you deal with that? And if not, then, well, perhaps not do a project with that particular person anymore. They might be extremely productive and very nice people, but if they just have a very different way of dealing with things than you do, then it may just be more of a headache than productive endeavor.
Makes sense. It's I was thinking of the Lord of the Rings, just that you have to create your team and the companion to go through the Shire and beyond. I don't want to say Mordor because it's not every project needs to be ending that place, but yeah, you need to create a team that you can trust and you can move forward. Baron, if I can ask you, you have been working on several projects with the very different teams. Do you have any other tips for productivity if you are leading the project, and also how to motivate people within your team, or make sure that the people within your team of the project keeps together?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's very important to define a holistic picture of where we're aiming for. So what is essentially our goal or objective? And as part of that journey, you want to, as I mentioned previously, you want to be able to break down into tasks. What are the different things that need to be done in order to get you to that journey? To get you to the stated end state of that journey. So personally, it depends on, essentially in the industry that I'm in, we're working with different clients. It depends on what tooling they're also comfortable with as well. But I'm a big fan of keeping it very lean and also very simple as well, in just coming up with a Kanban board of all the different tasks that need to be essentially carried out. And then when collaborating with the team, one of the things that I'm a fan of is giving autonomy and power to the team to essentially control their own tasks. What are the things that they're working on, and to provide continuous updates as well. I don't believe that it's conducive to have someone that effectively is monitoring and tracking everything and keeping these boards updated. I think you need to think of it as a tool that's there to help the team function as one unit, and then everyone should feel responsible in updating that and providing a status on how things are going. So I think generally keeping it very simple, using a Kanban board, and not overcomplicating also the different stages of the project management. Just ensuring that it's a lean process, and you have team members that take responsibility and have control over this, I think really helps a lot.
Definitely keeping everyone together and make everyone responsible so no one is left out. I think that's a very good practice to when you work and you manage the project. So thank you, Baron, for that answer. Viola, is there any other experience that you get from the MLOps area that you're working right now, or when you are creating your own application?
No, this is really a great question you asked, because actually when I joined AWS, I needed to get used to the fact that I will be exposed to multiple people when it comes to teams, teams which are supposed to deliver a given project, given opportunity. and I cooperate with people from everywhere. And this particular project you mentioned, this was a project delivered for Philips Healthcare. This was extremely challenging because people, team members actually were located starting from West Coast through East Coast, Europe, and ending up in Sydney. So it was, you can imagine that this was my first such experience, you know, and we really struggled, you know, because everybody actually needs to stretch. I needed actually to adjust, you know, and start very early in the morning to catch with my colleague, our ML lead in Sydney. Then sometimes, you know, stay a little bit longer, you know, to cooperate with and catch up with the works done by my colleagues from the US, and to plan actually the rest of the task for them for that day and so on. But this is Stefan mentioned extremely important thing, you know, to just you need to, in this specific setup, you really need to learn to quickly, you know, map personalities, figure out how people operate. I think that, in general, you know, at AWS, everybody is expected to, you know, to feel this ownership. And I think if people are ambitious, they feel this ownership. And this is what Baron mentioned, that they don't need to be micromanaged by a manager. But at the same time, we need to, as ambitious people, the problem which I often see is that I still struggle, you know, with this inclination, you know, to, yeah, I need to do this, and that on my own. We just need to, we are working in interdisciplinary teams. So yeah, we have ML engineers, data scientists, data architects, DevOps consultants, cloud infrastructure architects. So we just need to sense the right moment which you need to rely and, you know, reach out to your team member for help, yeah, and don't spend more time on figuring something, especially this is completely outside of your expertise. But sometimes, you know, really struggling, you just need to feel that you can rely on other team members, and this is very important thing. Another thing for my productivity, actually, for every day, taking into account that I have, you know, multiple parallel processes in my mind, as always, yeah. It's very important, you know, to plan my day. Of course, we will be talking about the tools for managing tasks, but in general, when seriously, my calendar looks like that I have, you know, time slots booked for meetings, but apart from that, I have slots. I need to do this, write email here, do something in exact, you know. Of course, you know, I'm pushing this thing because there are a lot of external factors which impact, you know, how, and sometimes, of course, it turns out that sometimes it needs more time, you know, to do something. But I, you know, operate on this, you know, calendar slots for different, you know, just be aware what I did and what I need to do next week and so on, whether I was productive, actually, how much time I spent on that. Yeah, so I'm correcting this on a running basis as well. Yeah,
definitely managing your calendar is really important, and my favorite meeting was also always lunch in my calendar. So yeah, I also try to plan my free time as well as my workload, so I know that I can keep on going every day, so I do not burn out. But speaking of the devil, about the tools, so once we know how to plan our project and we know how to set up the like our minds and relations with our colleagues or coworkers, do you guess what kind of tools we can actually leverage to run the project efficiently? So it will help us to push the project forward rather to, you know, be the tool just for being there. So I want to ask you, from your experience, what kind of tools have you been using, and where it was really resourceful for you? And Baron, and if I can start with you, you've mentioned Kanban, so I guess that the Kanban would be the tool number one here.
Indeed. So I think it all depends again on the context of the project. But I guess, things that are kind of go-to tools is for, particularly if you're collaborating and you need a Kanban board, something like Trello is always kind of a go-to. And then if it is a code-based project, then definitely GitHub and using GitHub projects to kind of enable that Kanban mechanism is always very good as well, because you can track issues, you can track anything that requires addressing in the code base. In terms of, there are, if you're working on your own on a project, then you don't necessarily have to be so deeply, invested into the tools. But I would say OneNote is probably my go-to tool whenever I'm working, on a project where I can take notes for myself and to ensure I archive that for future reference. But otherwise, if you're collaborating, there's if you need to have a centralized documentation, Confluence is always very good. So I would say, in my opinion, the tools should not be overtly the emphasis of when you're engaging in a project. You should look for what works for you. What is it that allows you to be as productive as possible and optimize your workflow, rather than thinking of these tools as, by definition, that this is what they do and this is what they enable. But these are just my go-to tools whenever, de facto tools that I go to whenever I'm engaged in a project.
Definitely. Making everything visible and shareable. It sounds like a good recipe for a successful project. Once we are within the area of code sharing and code scoping, Viola, what kind of tools do you use when you run the project? And
for code, based on my experience so far, GitHub or GitLab, interchangeably, this is more or less that. Yes, there are some customers, with Bitbuckets, and of course, there are others, but these are major ones, and I think most of them is based on GitHub.
So GitHub seems like a one tool that everyone should be using whenever there's a code involved. Stefan, if I can detour the question a little bit and ask a little bit about the more scientific project and more academic project. Is there any other tools that you can recommend to us in terms of running the scientific project?
Well, actually, we just submitted the manuscript for a forecasting textbook a couple of weeks ago. It's going to be published by CRC Press in a few months, and we'll also release a free online version of that. And now I'm going to tell you about the tool, and you will be completely surprised to know that it's GitHub, even though there is not code as such involved, but well, it's just R Markdown, so you could call that code if you want to. But it's even when you're collaborating on a scientific article and there's very little code, as in analysis or something, it's a textbook, very little code involved, we're still using GitHub. And I hear other people are using Overleaf, which is probably even simpler than GitHub in terms of wrapping your head around it. And either one is more or less LaTeX based. I personally, I'm a big fan of LaTeX. I learned that 20 years ago in my studies, and I've never stopped using it. I'm still writing my journal in LaTeX simply because I know that it's not going to break on me like a 2,000-page Word document that's going to break at some point in time. Then I'll have lost a lot of information that I simply want to keep track of. So I that's why I prefer LaTeX, and I would always recommend that people learn that and not rely on Word, because Word works fine until it doesn't, and then you have a big problem on your hands. And of course, GitHub works even better with LaTeX in terms of getting diff functionality, understanding what your coworkers just did to what they just checked in. I don't even know how well it works with Word documents, but yeah, GitHub, LaTeX, Overleaf. One other thing that we at SAP like using is Mural. Mural.co, I think, is the website. So we have a company subscription to that, and that's just a wonderful thing for all kinds of whiteboarding exercises collaboratively. So there's templates, you can put in stickers, you can do blind voting where you just have everybody vote and it's not revealed who voted for what, or you just have people put stickers on a board, and so they don't influence each other. You just blank them out for everybody else and then reveal everything at the end. And all kinds of interesting functionalities. I don't know whether there is a free subscription for academic or personal use or something like that. But if your institution has a subscription to Mural, I think that makes a lot of sense and it makes life much easier. Conversely, we're using Jira at SAP, and that's one of those tools that are extremely powerful and a little too powerful for me, because I've never manage to wrap my head around it. And there's always a problem if you have a tool that's very powerful and you don't use it on a daily basis. And I personally find it's very hard to get the handle on it. I like tools that I use every single day. You can do a lot of things there, turn into a power user pretty quickly, but something you only use once every 2 weeks or 3 months or something like that, you want something extremely simple, which is what Baron pointed out. The tool shouldn't be too powerful. There should be a reasonable simplicity. And if you're entering into a new collaboration, then everybody is trying to market their pet tools, and you kind of have to figure out which tools actually work in your particular situation. And that's always a bit of a challenge at the beginning of a new collaboration. And of course, when it comes to academic collaboration, there is a lot of Word documents being sent around still, and people working in review mode. And yeah, that's never going to go away, or at least not in the foreseeable future. And then just have to figure out who's been working on the document. And worst case is always when two people are working on the same document at the same point in time, and there's already a huge amount of reviews and corrections and whatever in the document, and you need to figure out who added what since the last time it was together, and that's a nightmare that nobody wants to deal with. And there you need some forceful personality who makes sure that nobody's working out of line. And nobody likes that forceful personality, but you need somebody to keep that role.
So basically, if anyone come up with a very good tool which will combine the reviews, basically we hit the jackpot for the academic project.
Yeah. And so many people have invented exactly that tool, and then it degenerated into yet another tool with the same strengths and weaknesses as everything else out there. I don't think that the one tool to rule them all is around the corner and will be released at some point in time. We'll have to deal with the fact that there are so many different tools, and everybody has to figure out which one works for them.
Definitely. Stefan, you've mentioned that in SAP you're working with Mira. When you can vote. Was it Mira then? The tool when you can
Mural,
vote?
Mural and Jira.
Mural.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Do you know any other tools that can leverage the cooperation or communication and cooperation, and basically coordinating our actions? Because so far we have talking about the tools which were useful for project management, so to push the project forward, but the communication, as we also established at the webinar, is as important as the scope of the project. So do you know any other tools that you can use for communication between the teams?
Well, many of those tools probably everybody already knows and everybody already uses. We're using Zoom right now, which has certain functionalities. I assume that everybody by now knows MS Teams, Microsoft Teams, which has a lot of functionalities and probably more than any single person knows how to deal with. And I like Teams. It's a bit of a learning curve involved, but there's so many different possibilities of automatically recording meetings, having links, having workspaces, assigning people to workspaces. So you can do a lot of things with these very much straightforward tools that everybody has on their Microsoft machine. I don't know about the true believers in Linux and Mac OS, but they probably have something similar too.
Definitely. I believe it will be Slack, or at least this is the tool that I have been using for a very brief moment. I was working on Mac, and I have to say that it was very efficient too. Viola, you've mentioned also that you have been working like very internationally, like you have been working with very different time zones. Is there any other tools that you make the cooperation and communication smooth? And
for communication, I use Slack as well, and I really love Slack. I recommend it to everyone. Actually, I see this kind of distinction when it comes, to the internal cooperation, because of course Slack allows, to add different workspaces. You can switch, of course, but you can invite and create the shared workspaces with other companies as well. Yeah, so this is a way to go, but to be honest, it's used for, very short direct communication, but yeah, still emails. And when we want to, meet, of course, there is a meeting organized via Teams. Internally, we use Chime. But yeah, many of the customers, yeah, I would say that Microsoft Teams are the, the dominant one. But for my internal communication, Slack is preferable tool, and of course preferred tool. And when it comes, to the sharing, but yeah, you need to always, remember about retention period, history retention period, and yeah. Because then after some time, and yeah, because this is from obvious storage constraints, so we don't want to, generate too high costs of storing this files. So, and it's not sustainable in general, because it's of course we can share files, but we should have SharePoints, some shared file systems, shared spaces. So yeah, SharePoint is one of them. MS Teams, yeah, because this is connected. In our case, this is Amazon Work Docs. So yeah, this is basically how we operate when it comes to sharing the files. Yeah, yeah, and communication.
All right, so I believe that we have like a top 3 tools for the communication. Baron, can I ask you, from your experience as when working in the international company, when basically you have the offices all around the world, is there any other tools or tricks, tips that you use to communicate efficiently?
No, I think it was covered very well by both Stefan and Violetta. It's Teams is definitely the ecosystem of Microsoft. Enables so much. And I think if it's well integrated into the way you operate, whether it's with OneDrive and what you can do with sharing files, and if you have an ecosystem of MS products, I think it really does make life very simple in terms of collaboration. Slack for for techies, it is the go-to messaging platform. But otherwise, I think it's been covered very well. I think these are essentially what I would say is mostly used by our clients as well.
So that was also the important point, that the communication that you are working with is also like dependent on the client that you're working with. So basically, you have to adjust and adapt to whatever environment that the client is having in terms of the business. I mean, academia, basically whatever the university provides, then you have also to adapt. Looking at the time, I think that we need to wrap up things slowly. Honestly, I have no idea when this time passed by. The talk and the discussion is extremely interesting. As a last question for the main part of the webinar, I would like to ask you if you have any best practices or like the golden rule in terms of the project management and also the project planning. Viola, is there any other any tip that you can let us know, like the motto that you wanted to leave us with?
Always add 20% more to your budget. Yeah. So yeah, this is pro tip. Especially when you start working on things which are new to you. Yeah, definitely need some time for research and so on. Of course, it all depends whether this is academic grant, yeah, whatever, and you can you have a very big budget, because when it comes to commercial side, even if this budget seem really big, yeah, I would say that managing expectations of a customer, yeah, it's very, very difficult when your costs and the setup, when they cannot when they don't know what they can expect. Yeah, so this is yeah, this is pretty challenging. And when you are supposed to deliver something which you need to figure out during the project, yeah, the entire architecture, it's unknown, there are a lot of unknowns. So we need to definitely, in such a situation, put a lot more, I would say, margin when it comes to estimation. Yeah, this is pretty much that.
Definitely better safe than sorry. Very powerful saying indeed. Baron, if you have any words of wisdom for us from your experience as a data science manager and director.
I think one of the things that I aspire to is a piece of advice that was given to me very early on in my career, which was when you're essentially on a journey, engaging in a project, and you're identifying all the tasks that you need to carry out, it's good to identify what potential risk areas are. What are the things that are, risks that you should account for? And the advice that was given to me is don't let risks turn to issues. So I think one of the things that you should try and do is, if you're able to foresee what potential risks are coming up, address them head on. Don't allow them to turn into issues that potentially will become problems down the line.
Thank you. Definitely. Yep. Knowing your risk and how to manage, it's also the part of the project management. And Stefan, as a closing motto, what kind of the best practices do you have for us?
Well, again, Violetta and Baron already said a lot, and I'm going to re-emphasize what Violetta said, or also already at the very beginning. First off, things always take longer than you anticipate. Even if you anticipate they will take longer, they will still take longer. So essentially things will take very long indeed. And what we do in software development is we have this agile mindset, and I think that's something important also to other people, to researchers or everywhere else. The idea is, or part of the idea is, to get something running quickly, because since everything will take longer than you anticipate, it's better to have something that works, even if it doesn't have the full functionalities that you wanted at the very beginning, even if the project didn't, if the software doesn't do what you wanted to do, even if you didn't analyze everything you were going to analyze in your project description. It's better to have something at the end rather than aim for the moon shot and then not even get off the ground. That's a very bad place to be. And one interesting thing about this is, you as the analyst, you as a person who did the work, you're likely not going to be happy with the result, but the people who you show it to, they will be happy. Because you, the person that just spent weeks or months on a project, you see everything that doesn't work, everything that you wanted to do, everything that would have been cool to do. And so you're not satisfied with what you managed to do. But the people that you're showing it to at the end, they see what you've done and they see what you did, and that they typically will be amazed at what you did, and this will already deliver a great deal of value. So what I'm saying is try to build something that works, even if it's very simple, and then build on that, rather than try for the big shot from the very beginning.
Thank you. So that will be the end of our core part of the webinar. I think that we have still a few minutes for 1 or 2 questions from the audience. So if anyone like to ask the question to our guests, please feel free to do. All right. I think that we covered all of them. So thank you very much on behalf of Early Career Forecasters Group for joining us today for that webinar. If you'd like to stay in touch and know more about the webinars that as Early Career Groups we organize, please see our LinkedIn fan page, when you can find, which you can find under the Early Career Forecasters Group under the IAF. And also, if any of you are joining the International Symposium on Forecasters in Charlottesville this year, I'm warmly welcome you to attend the Early Career Forecasters panel discussion, which will be there, and we're going to talk about how we can run smoothly the projects within the international environment. So once again, thank you very much for joining, and hopefully see you on the other webinar.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. The same to you. Bye-bye.